Okay, so moving on to the NFC. Let's start with the NFC East. The Washington Redskins, I'm going to start at the bottom this time. They got Chase Young. They had the second pick in the draft, the defensive end from Ohio State. He's going to be very good, but I don't like what I saw from Dwayne Haskins, the quarterback, the rookie from last year. He has potential, but I didn't see him transferred into the NFL field against like a real competitive team. So I think that's going to really slow him down going forward, and they won't be able to accomplish as much as they want to get done. And I think, again, they get last place in that division at around a 4-win season, 4-12 approximately. But that's early because they don't have a set quarterback, I don't think. My third best team in the NFC East for next year will be the New York Giants. They have Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones starting his second year after his rookie year where Eli Manning retired. They have good-ish pieces on offense with Golden Tate, Evan Ingram, and Saquon, but their defense is lacking. That defense cannot compete with the other two NFC East talents in Philadelphia and Dallas, and I think there'll be a giant drop-off between those two teams between Philadelphia and Dallas and New York and Washington, because there's a little bit of an elite factor that's missing from Washington and New York to get them back into like the groove of competing and being a real competitive team. So I think personally, second place will be the Philadelphia Eagles. You guys, if you have any different opinions, leave it in the comments. But I think that Philadelphia, they have Carson Wentz, who plays good sometimes, plays mediocre sometimes, and always gets injured. That's the one thing you can always rely on. But they got a wide receiver from TCU, Rager, and a lot of people didn't believe that he was the best receiver available or even the best fit for Philadelphia. But I think that they have a lot of okay talent, especially on offense. Their defense is very good with Fletcher Cox, but their offense is okay at best. At best, they have Carson Wentz, they have Alshon Jeffrey, and they have Zach Ertz. But I don't know if that's going to be able to win that division because I really, really have faith in the Dallas Cowboys, and I'll get into it right now. So I have the Cowboys finishing the year at the record of 11-5. Strictly because the Cowboys got another weapon after locking up Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper for long-term contracts. They added on CeeDee Lamb because Philadelphia wanted him, so they took it before Philadelphia could even think about it. They also got head coach Mike McCarthy, who I know very well as a Packers fan, and he has potential. He honestly has potential because he has the possibilities. He's a Super Bowl winning head coach. So Dallas is in a great situation where they have a franchise quarterback, hopefully, if they lock him up long term. They have Ezekiel Elliott, an absolutely great running back, a lot of great wide receivers. The defense is a bit shaky, especially the secondary, but I think if you look at the rest of the team, it's just so well balanced that it won't mean a major difference. So I think I didn't go over the predictions I have for like regular for the score, the record that each team will have. So I think, like I said, Dallas is going to be 11-5, Philadelphia at 9-7, New York Giants at, what would I say, 7-9, and I gave Washington a 4-12, let's say. And then moving on to the NFC North. So I'm going to start off going back from top to bottom. I'm going to start off with my Green Bay Packers. A little bit of a surprising offseason for them. They lost big names like Brian Bulaga on the offensive line. They lost Blake Martinez to the New York Giants. And they didn't really necessarily get anyone else to replace them. They got an injury-prone linebacker from Cleveland. And they drafted quarterback Jordan Love out of Utah, Utah State. That surprised a lot of people because it was like drafting Aaron Rodgers as replacement. And that really doesn't sit well with a lot of people, especially Packers fans that were so close to getting to the Super Bowl. It was just between them and San Francisco. So I think that the Packers are still the team to beat in the NFC because I'll get into it. The other three teams I personally believe got worse in the offseason. I'll explain why. But I think the Packers are going to finish and get the 4th seed in the NFC playoffs at a 10-6 record. And Dallas will be the 3 seed at 11-5. Moving on to my number 2 seed for next year, to the surprise of many, the Chicago Bears. So the Chicago Bears are going to be better strictly because they did something about the quarterback situation. They brought in Nick Foles, who is a Super Bowl champion and can come in and win a Super Bowl. And he knows Matt Nagy. He knows the system. He knows what he's doing. So he can help win games for the team. And Mitchell Trubisky will probably lose in a quarterback competition with him unless he steps up and starts playing better football. But regardless, that team has running backs Tariq Cohen, and they have a second running back that was a rookie last year, along with Allen Robinson at wide receiver. And the only thing that I don't like about Chicago is they have 10 tight ends on their roster. They drafted Komet from Notre Dame in the draft in the second round. And I think that actually was a bad idea because they got Jimmy Graham from the Packers in the offseason, and they have Adam Shaheen, and they have a couple tight ends on the roster that are starting caliber tight ends. They just don't really need all that. I mean, they don't need that many tight ends. So, I mean, not saying that that's bad, but I don't think that's good enough to beat Green Bay. But I still think that Chicago sneaks into the playoffs at a 9-7 record and at about, I think, around the 6th or 7th seed. Seventh would be my guess. Minnesota, the next one down. The reason I don't have Minnesota going back to the playoffs, which also could surprise a lot of people, is they lost Stephon Diggs and they got Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver from LSU, who I don't think is as good as Stephon Diggs, doesn't have the same abilities. I could be wrong, but I don't think it will translate over to the NFL level. And especially their secondary, outside of that safety position, is really good with Anthony Barr. Not Anthony, he's the linebacker, with Anthony Harris. But the cornerbacks, they lost both Trey Waynes and Xavier Rhodes in the offseason. So it's really uncertain what the secondary, specifically the cornerback situation, will look like next season. And that, I don't have faith much in that, especially, and also they lost Emerson Griffin on the defensive line. But I also think that for Minnesota, I think that they could get another possible injury, whether it be Kirk Cousins or Cook or Thielen, that would pretty much destroy the team, to put it simply, not have them winning with a winning record. And I think that leaves them at about an 8-8 record, which would shock a lot of people, but I honestly think that would be the reality of it, because I think they digressed a lot from where they were last year. And the Detroit Lions coming in at last place, having the third pick of the draft, and they got Jeff Okudah, the cornerback from Ohio State, but they also traded away Darius Slay, the all-pro cornerback, to Philadelphia, who kind of was one of their best defensive players, and now they replaced him with a younger, slower version of Darius Slay. So they didn't necessarily improve. They pretty much stayed the same as they were last year, if anything. And they weren't that good last year, in case you guys didn't notice. So I think that team goes around 5-11. I think that's a good record to give them. So yeah, 5-11 for them, and then 8-8, 9-7, and 10-6. So I think that between Minnesota and Green Bay, it will be a 2-game separation between making the playoffs and not making it at all. Because I think the NFC North, none of the teams got better. I'll get into the NFC South and West. But they're also so competitive and so close that you can't ever really count out any of the teams, especially Green Bay. They didn't lose a single game to an NFC North team last year. And I know in the NFC North, that doesn't sit well with any of the other teams. So moving down to the NFC South, I'm going to start off with the New Orleans Saints. And a lot of people are getting on the hype train about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after they added Tom Brady and Gronkowski, but I'll get to that later. I still think that New Orleans, getting Jameis Winston, the former quarterback of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who knows the playbook, who knows the coach, who knows the system of Tampa Bay, and Taysom Hill, they locked him up for 2 more years, the backup to Drew Brees. So they have a 3-quarterback system, and they got Emmanuel Sanders, the number 1 wide receiver from San Francisco, and they made their team just so much better than it already was last year. I don't see how a team like the Buccaneers, especially with the limited amount of practice they'll have this offseason because of the pandemic around the world, I don't see how they can go in and defeat the champions of the NFC South and be the better team. So I have New Orleans getting the number 1 seed in the playoffs. I think they will be the best, because they were tied as having the best record in the NFC last year, but they didn't make it because of tiebreakers. But I think this year they're going to finish 14-2. They will be the best team in the NFL. Actually, that's going to be my early say. Best team in the NFL, and I think they will be the number 1 seed. They'll get the bye week in the playoffs. The number 2 seed will be Tampa Bay. They will most likely make the playoffs because with Brady, Gronkowski, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Ronald Jones, and O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate, that's just the offensive players. That's a lot of talent, and to not make the playoffs, it doesn't sound really possible. And on defense, they have Shaq Barrett, who they franchise tagged. Hopefully he stays there because he was the league leader in sacks the first 4 weeks last year, and he was a really, really strong defensive player of the year candidate before he started to slow down a little bit. And they have a couple other big pieces they brought back, like Ndamukong Suh and a couple other guys that will help the Buccaneers get into the playoffs. I think they'll be the number 6 seed at I say 10-6 record because they'll be good, but they won't be as good as New Orleans. I don't see it happening because maybe next year, like 2021, but not 2020. It's way too early. And I would say the same thing about the Cleveland Browns of last year. So much potential, they didn't live up to it. And now moving on to Atlanta Falcons, I think they'll be 3rd place. I think they take a step up, I guess. They got Todd Gurley, who has he had arthritis in his knee. He's good. He's not necessarily someone I would consider a game changer, especially I don't know how he'll play off his injuries. They say he's fully healthy, but I'm not fully bought. So I want to see how he performs coming out of his injuries. And I think that Julio Jones and Matt Ryan would be as good as advertised. And they got Hayden Hurst, the tight end from Baltimore. But outside of that, Dan Quinn, they started off really, really poor last year, and they didn't really have injuries. They just didn't play well to start the season. And now with the addition of the Buccaneers, it makes it ever so harder for them to compete with New Orleans, rather alone just make the playoffs. And I think that will be okay. I think they finish around 9-7, maybe 8-8. Not really. I don't think 8-8. I think 9-7 is a better way of putting it because they're a good. They have potential. I just don't think they'll, get that potential. And then the Carolina Panthers will be I think they get the last place in the NFC South. But I think they'll actually be close. I think they'll get a 7-9 or 6-10 record. By no means will be one of the bottom dwellers in the NFL. I think that they are absolutely a great team. They got Teddy Bridgewater, and they got PJ Walker, the former Roughnecks, the XFL quarterback, who he was going to be the MVP of the new Exhibition XFL League, and he was signed into Carolina. But I think that they also have a lot of good defensive players. They were the first team ever to draft 7 defensive players in the NFL draft, as I told you guys in my previous video. And I think that it will help them be a good-ish team, but they don't have necessarily good tight end because they got rid of Greg Olsen, and they have Robbie Anderson. They have the pieces, but Teddy Bridgewater, I don't know if he can lead a team because I haven't seen it since Minnesota, and that was so many years ago before injuries and all that stuff. So maybe not this year, maybe next year, but the NFC South for me this year will be the biggest question mark team going forward because I don't know what's going to happen. All those teams could be incredible or all those teams could be awful. You don't know. And moving on to my last division of the day, the NFC West. So I'm going to start off with the defending champions, San Francisco 49ers, who I have being the 2nd place team in the NFC West, so I'm going to get back to them in a second. My 1st place team will be the Seattle Seahawks. Why? Seattle, I think, is a good, solid team that's built, and they brought in Greg Olsen, the tight end from Carolina, to help with Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and that really, really powerful run game. And they were the number 1 most effective rushing team before all their running backs pretty much got injured. That defense is really good with Bobby Wagner. I don't know what's going to happen with Jadeveon Clowney. Most likely he's leaving because they didn't live. I'll update you guys in future videos. But I think that Seattle is that number 1 team. They have consistency, and it's going to be close. But I think that they get the 3rd seed in the playoffs because of the fact that 2nd seed in the playoffs because I gave Dallas a 3rd. I'll give them a 2nd, fine. At 11-5. They'll be tied with Dallas. I don't have them winning more than 11 games. That's a little bit too much to ask for. But I think that that's still a really, really good team, and they have all the potential they need to win. Going to the San Francisco 49ers, so as you guys might know from other previous years, there's a thing called the Super Bowl slump, where a team plays in the Super Bowl and doesn't perform nowhere as well as they did the previous year. So I don't really think that the San Francisco 49ers, they lost to Forrest Buckner, they lost to Emmanuel Sanders, And I don't necessarily think that they're going to be able to be as good as they were last year because of the fact that they don't have the firepower on offense. And more than anything, I think that San Francisco will be a really good number 2 team. They will make the playoffs, of course. I have no doubt about that. I think they will be the number, what did I give? I gave Chicago the number 7 seed and Tampa Bay. So they'll be the 6th seed. I think they finish at a respectable 10-6, same as the Buccaneers, and they lose in tiebreakers. But I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo is a real starting elite NFL quarterback. And that's a big, big question for me, so I'm not exactly sure. And another thing is, I think that it's the Super Bowl slump more than anything. Maybe a couple injuries somewhere here or there, but I don't necessarily right now have faith in this, especially their wide receiver core. They have Deebo Samuel and the rookie Brandon Ayuk from Arizona State because they lost Marquise Goodwin and Emmanuel Sanders, so I don't know what that wide receiver core looks like to go along with George Kittle, so we'll see how that goes. And then my 3rd place team in the NFC West, I have the Arizona Cardinals and not the Los Angeles Rams because Arizona got DeAndre Hopkins to help with Kyler Murray and Larry Fitzgerald and Kenyon Drake. And that team has all the pieces it needs. Plus, they got Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker from Clemson, who plays every position, safety, linebacker, cornerback. And he's incredible because he's a true positionless player to go along with Patrick Peterson and Chandler Jones, the linebacker. And I think that team is going to be really good, a 9-7 record, just so close. But they just need a couple more years, maybe another 1 or 2 years of experience, similar to another team that I gave, like a Cleveland Browns. That's a good example. And my 4th team is the Los Angeles Rams. Absolutely a great defense. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, 2 of the best, especially Aaron Donald, the best defensive tackle, and Jalen Ramsey is arguably the best cornerback. But that offense lost Todd Gurley, they lost Brandon Cooks, and Jared Goff is not necessarily an elite level quarterback, and I don't know if he can play that well without them, especially having 2 receivers that aren't as good. That will be his, like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. They're not as good as, they're not a number 1 receiver like Brandon Cooks was, but hopefully they can step up and fill the shoes that he left, and Josh Reynolds will probably be the number 3 wide receiver. But that team has a lot of question marks, especially on offense. That defense is awesome, don't get me wrong. But I think that they play in the best division in the NFL. It could be between them and our NFC South, but I think it is them right now because the Niners just came off the Super Bowl. The Cardinals just got DeAndre Hopkins, and Seattle's always really good. So I think they are, again, an 8-8 record. Maybe 7-9 at worst. They cannot do worse than that. They have too much star power. They have too many weapons. So I think, summarizing the whole thing, it will be Seattle as the number 1 seed, San Francisco, then Arizona, and then Los Angeles. So to recap all of the NFC predictions from the 1 seed to the 7th seed, my number 1 seed, like I said, is New Orleans, who I personally believe at 14-2 will be the team to beat. Drew Brees is 41 right now, maybe 42. He's going into the season as a win-it-now season. He has maybe 1, maybe 2 years left on his deal before he joins the broadcasting booth at NBC. And I think he has to win. He's destined to eventually. The number 2 seed, like I said, Seattle. Could be wrong. I have them as the 2 and Dallas as the 3 at the same record. Green Bay as the 4 because they didn't address, of course, the players, the talent they needed at the offseason. That kind of shot themselves in the foot. And the 5 seed, I have Tampa Bay for Tom Brady. Number 6 will be the San Francisco 49ers. And number 7 will be the Chicago Bears. Sorry about that. So what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts about what I said so far about the AFC and the NFC, about the 2020 season, whether it will start on time or be postponed because of the pandemic, how this new playoff picture will be. There's a lot of questions about this new NFL league year, and I'm really excited to check it out. So please like and subscribe to my channel, and thank you as always for watching. I'll see you guys next time.